Hello, this is Christina Barr, and you're watching Black Tea News. Hello, welcome to Black Tea News. I'm your host, Christina Barr, and tonight, thank you for joining me this evening. We're going to be talking about diving into this whole African American history studies in Florida and the drama surrounding it, and Kamala Harris, the response from DeSantis, the response from Black Republicans in Congress, and responses to those Republicans from the left and the right, and there's other groups that have spoken. They've compared the lessons to, like, what'd you say about the Holocaust and all kinds of different stuff. So I'm going to dive into it. I will be joined tonight by ThisIsSavvy. She is having a little bit of technical difficulty, so when she jumps on, well, you will know. So before we jump into it, I thought I might as well do my intro. And if there's an issue beyond that, I'll let you know. But a little technical difficulty on her end. But before we jump into it, I want to encourage you guys to go to blackteennews.com, check out different content on my website, different articles, different videos, etc. I do have some content on this particular issue, which we'll dive into when we get into that particular topic. If you like what I do here, please consider leaving a donation at blackteennews.com/donate. It costs to stream, it costs to run my website. So if you can support with that overhead, and as we continue to grow and expand, if you can support in that kind of way, God bless you. I very much appreciate it. There should be a link in the descriptions on Facebook and YouTube that you should be able to go just from the donate page and click and see what kind of stuff we have for donations. And you can also go to the merchandise store to see what other kind of merch that we have at the store. Like, I will show you a few. Looks like Savvy is in the queue. Like the "I am not the victim you're looking for" t-shirt. We got the "Be better, not bitter." Some advice I would like people to take. I do have lots of books that I also have written. 2 are nonfiction, and the rest are fiction. One of my nonfiction books is Slay Your Fear: How to Overcome a Spirit of Fear. The other one is, of course, God is Blatantly Against Abortion, which is available on Amazon. It's also available on Barnes & Noble. So my sister Tina Barr is in the chat. She actually did this illustration for the Hand of God Reaching Out to the Baby here. So she did such a wonderful job. It just, makes me proud every time I see the cover. She did a great job with that. The rest of my books are a plethora of different things whenever I feel like writing. So there's a picture with me in a lot of my books, but I write children's books. I write, all kinds of stuff, vampires, werewolves, etc. I do have a historical fiction fantasy book about the Civil War. Imagine like the Civil War meets X-Men. So this is my favorite series I've probably written. So go ahead and check that out. I'm not saying it's the most historical accurate thing ever, but it's a fun time. So go ahead and check that out. So anyway, let's see if things are all good. Are things all good? Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes,
okay. Lordy, that was dramatic for nothing.
Okay.
Yeah. I haven't used this in so long. So when I went to turn it on, I'm like, okay, there should be a light here. It's not doing what it's supposed to do. So I'm like, why? Yeah, it was a USB port. I have like a portable like USB hub, like really small one. Apparently this one, it wasn't on. Never mind. I figured out what was wrong.
Everyone's glad to have you here. People were very excited to have like Savvy's on tonight. Oh my gosh.
So yeah, you guys get to see this side of my head because my setup is just weird.
I think the last time we were on, you had trouble with your USB, correct? I think so.
Probably. It's a hot mess. Where is my hat? My whole bare head. That's what looks weird to me.
So we're gonna go through like the timeline, I guess, from the beginning of Kamala Harris flipping out about this curriculum and going from the responses. And um, if there's anything that you want to jump in as we go through from the beginning to the basically the end and the commentary surrounding it, just have at it. First thing I want to note is that back in January, if you recall, Ron DeSantis rejected a curriculum, an AP curriculum, because it had queer theory in it. It had some CRT, it had BLM stuff, it had intersectionality, and
Yeah.
they changed the law and they said, hey, you can't have CRT and other stuff in it. And so people reacted crazy to it. Kamala Harris said they were extremists. The White House said it was, wrong for them to do that. And so people were acting like them rejecting this particular curriculum was DeSantis being racist and saying that they shouldn't learn about African American history.
Yeah.
And even though within their laws, you have to, it's a requirement, you have to learn about African American history. So here's this curriculum they've presented, and now they're upset about it. But the funny thing, though, is back then in the AP standards, they had this. In addition to the agricultural work, enslaved people learned specialized trades and worked as painters, carpenters, tailors, musicians, and healers in the North and South. Once free, American, there's a typo there, it's supposed to be African Americans,
Americans
to provide for themselves and others. So that was in the curriculum for the AP,
right,
that they were racist for not accepting. So this is very, very similar to what they're up in arms about right now. So that,
yeah,
they freaked out about that back in January. So Kamala Harris is the one who started this craziness. So here's a clip of her when she first started talking about it.
And while they do this, check it out. They push forward revisionist history. Just yesterday in the state of Florida, they decided middle school students will be taught that enslaved people benefited from slavery. They insult us in an attempt to gaslight us, and we will not stand for it.
First, who is us? Who is us? Technically, if you want to get technical about it, she's not even an African American.
That's true.
Her mother is Indian. Her father is Jamaican. Like, culturally, we are not the same people. Ethnically, we're not the same. I mean, yeah, she's Black in the sense, but she's not an African American. Our histories are not the same. African Americans speak specifically to Black Americans whose ancestors were enslaved in the Americas. So who is this we that she's talking about? That's just a personal gripe.
I think it's hilarious that she said, we will not be gaslit. Mark, are you kidding me? That's all these people are trying to do.
I've been saying this for a while now. Like, politicians in general, whether they're Democrat or Republican or what have you, they prey on stupid people. They hope you're stupid because they don't want to be, put to task and have to explain what they're actually saying or what they actually mean or what they even believe is best for this country. And so instead of, being genuine, they are going to hope and cross their fingers that you're stupid and emotional enough to just believe the BS. And especially when they're targeting Black Americans, because we're an emotional people. And we're dramatic, and we have a flair for the dramatic. It's us. So they really do prey on the emotional kind of aspect of the Black community, hoping that Black Americans, they can rile up our emotions, get us angry, get us upset, get us in our feels, and that we will be too emotional to really think logically or to even look into something ourselves. I need my hat. So I mean, what she's saying is not true. It's not genuine, and I know that. You know that.
I think most people know that, and I think to the root we'll see. Everyone knows instinctively that the language, and just to be clear, the language that they're upset about, the curriculum says, examine the various duties and trades performed by slaves. Examples are agricultural work, painting, carpentry, tailoring, domestic service, blacksmithing, transportation. Instruction includes how slaves develop skills which in some instances could be applied for their personal benefit. And the fact that they learned skills and used them to their personal benefit, those are the 2 points that are both true, but it's offensive because we don't like how it sounds. And there's been people who've spoken out against this who I'm like, but you acknowledge that they did learn skills. And so do we think they're too stupid to take knowledge that they have obtained and skills that they have obtained? Yes, by force, but to then use it to their benefit, that's just nonsensical.
Oh, goodness. American slavery, just the history of slavery in this country is it's an interesting one. If you want to talk about, from the 1600s, you can talk about that. Or if you want to talk about slavery in America post the Revolutionary War, because the abolition of slavery began post-Revolutionary War. It was an ongoing battle for less than 100 years, trying to gradually get slavery out of the states. You have to be completely ignorant about Black people in general to even think that those statements aren't true, that these people who were enslaved, who gained skills, didn't somehow take these skills and use them to their benefit and figure out ways they could help themselves and to better and enrich their own lives. I think part of the problem is we have this very minimalistic way of looking at slavery. We keep it very simple, which makes sense in a school setting because you only have so much time and so many days to go broad. And that's what an African-American studies, that's what I called it when I was in school. It was African-American studies, African-American history, same thing. It's supposed to go beyond the broad and get into the nitty-gritty details. So when you're in like a regular history class learning about slavery, they're going to really stick to talking about what's relevant to their area. I'm originally from North Carolina, so they're going to talk a lot about tobacco plantations and cotton, because cotton is still big in the eastern part of North Carolina. So you're going to stick to that. So you have a lot of people within the Southern United States who are learning about slavery with respect to plantation work. And then when you have people from up north where slavery was gradually taken away much sooner than the South, a lot of what they learn really is plantation work. They learn about slavery with respect to how it was in the South. So you have a lot of people who have this weird thought about slavery that it was just all plantations. There were no opportunities. There's so much gray in the middle of the black and white that just makes it a much more beautiful and rich story in history. And that's the point of African American studies. I don't even know if I'm making any sense, but
no, it makes sense. It makes sense, and it's precisely what other people have talked about in literature. Even what's going around now on Twitter right now is someone who was an advisor on the 1619 project wrote in a book. I don't remember the title here, but I have Ed Baptist here from one of his books talks about how various kinds of specialized expertise in the East, in the Chesapeake Bay, Carolinas, enslaved men rose in status by learning trades. They might be blacksmiths or coppers, teamsters or house servants. Women could become servants, cooks, and weavers. Such skills could gain one a respite from incessant field labor, or even give hired out slaves a possibility of keeping some of the earnings. Artisans were even imported in Louisiana. Sugar making, for instance, required a class of trained enslaved experts who supervised the boiling process. They sold for high prices. Whites identified 5% of the local slaves. I don't know if that's 5 or someone's cut off, but sold in New Orleans from 1800 to 1820 with a specific skill. So it's prior to this week or last week, this was something that people could admit and was in books, and the books are still out there. And it was in the AP course, and it's still out there. But this is a political talking point, and unfortunately, there's some folks on our side of the aisle who are some of them are in prominent positions, which makes it unfortunate because the conversation is shifting from Kamala did this, the media is propping up Kamala's lie, And now it's, oh, well, the Black Republicans are the ones with the problem with it now. And I'll show an example of that. But I think Byron Donald was the one who maybe spoke about it first, having an issue with it. And so he said it was very robust, the curriculum, but he had a problem with the line, saying that it features the personal benefits of slavery and is wrong and needs to be adjusted. And he said that obviously wasn't the goal, and he thought that they would change it. So they didn't change it, and they're like, no, we're not bending to the woke, and you're comparing Kamala Harris. And so then he took offense to them saying that he was agreeing with Kamala Harris, but he is agreeing with Kamala Harris, because how he's framing it, that's not what
it says.
It's not what it says.
There's a big difference between, the personal benefits of slavery, and they were able to use some things they learned in slavery to their benefit. There's a big difference.
Yeah, and that's really the distinction that people are I don't know, choosing to miss, or we're just refusing to see. And I've had conversations with people who are like, you don't believe that slaves had skills before they came to America? I'm like, not every slave was off the boat. Oh. I'm like, my dad knew like video editing, not great, but he taught me how to do it. Just because he learned something and there was that knowledge in the family doesn't mean that I didn't have to learn it. So I don't understand the anger there and that particular talking point.
It's such a weird thing to say, because I've seen that before seen it on Twitter, where people saying, don't you think they had skills when they were in Africa? They were enslaved when they were in Africa. That's how they got here. Like, that's how it started. Like, I think it's frustrating because it's, in a sense, it's our story. It's our history, and it's how we got from point A to point B, and how we as Black women are here now. It's part of our story, and it's a story of strength and resilience and resourcefulness. And that part of it has been passed down to Black people now. Like, Black women are some of the most resourceful, resilient people on this planet. I will stand by that. Mm-hmm. Where do you think that comes from? These are things that have been passed down. This didn't just pop up willy-nilly once slavery was over. No. There's documented history of Black men and women buying their freedom, using their skills to make their own money so they can buy their own freedom.
Yeah. So Tim Scott was asked about it, which I'm not surprised, because something happens and they asked Tim Scott because he's Black. So I'm not surprised they asked him. So this is his reply.
As a country founded upon freedom, the greatest deprivation of freedom was slavery. There's no silver lining in freedom, in slavery. The truth is that anything you can learn, that any benefits that people suggest you had during slavery, you would have had as a free person. What slavery was really about separating families, about mutilating humans, and even raping their wives. It was just devastating. So I would hope that every person in our country, and certainly running for president, would appreciate that. And listen, people have bad days. Sometimes they regret what they say, and we should ask them again to clarify their positions.
So I thought his statement wasn't terrible. It wasn't quite as the accusation is like Byron Donald's, and we'll get to some of the other people in their comments, but he's not using well, obviously no one is saying that you have to be enslaved to acquire these skills. And but that's how people are taking it. So that's an inaccurate statement. But he's also using silver lining incorrectly, I would say. Like, for example, my dad was had COVID and had to go to the hospital. It was like right the day after the election he went in, and it was awful for our family. And we couldn't see him. It was hard to get a hold of him, and he was basically on knocking at death's door. We had to like encourage him to hold on and stuff. The doctors were telling us one thing. It really felt like being on an episode of House. Mm-hmm. And but as dark and awful as that time was, the silver lining I could say was seeing how my mother held on to her faith. And we get a terrible doctor's report, and so she would say, well, we know how we need to pray. And so she had like certain scriptures and encouraging things that she put up on her wall. And just seeing that strength of my mother, that's the silver lining. The silver lining is that positive thing you can find within the darkness. It's not the same thing as like the benefit that's in the actual curriculum. So I don't even feel like anything that he said was really correct, but it wasn't as bad as Byron Donald's.
It's just frustrating because I have to remind myself that Tim Scott is running for president. So obviously he wants to distance himself from Ron DeSantis as much as possible. And obviously this is a great opportunity for him, whether you agree with him or not. It's a great opportunity for Tim Scott to come out looking like the better man because, right under Donald Trump, Ron DeSantis is the favorite. So, and he's, I think Republicans in general love Tim Scott. I just don't know if Republicans see him as presidential. I don't think they're quite there yet with seeing Tim Scott as a president. And he knows that. I think he's trying to separate himself as much as possible to make himself look better than Ron DeSantis. This is a perfect opportunity for him to do that. But yeah, the way he's using silver lining in there, they're just repeating the things that they've heard. I don't know if these men have actually looked into what it is they're talking about. They're just being asked a question and they're responding to that question. They're not responding to the truth. And that's where it becomes an issue. And I think that's where people are getting frustrated. And at the end of the day, Republican voters are the ones they need to be impressing. I think there are already enough people who are Democrats who are pissed off with Joe Biden that they're not going to want to vote for Joe Biden. So right now you've got to rally the base together, make sure they get to where they need to be. And the base in general is just not in agreement with what's happening with Byron and Tim Scott because our base can read apparently. So
yes, no, they're getting some people are really upset about Tim Scott's comments. People are really upset about Byron Donald's comments. Charlie Kirk and Jack Posobiec, they're like all in
ruthless.
Trump. They're all into Trump, but when they saw this, they're like, no, that like some things are more important. Like you got to stand up for something that's objectively true. And so but they were just baffled. Like I like he's a good guy. I don't know why they would say this. Now I can believe that the line actually upsets Byron. I can believe that he doesn't like it, and because I know people who know him. I've never met him, but I can accept they don't like it. But there's other comments from other Republicans that are kind of more troubling. So Wesley Hunt here, he used a particular line that's repeated by John James. That's pretty interesting. He said, as a direct descendant of a slave, I have a hard time understanding Governor DeSantis' position that transferable skills learned in bondage are somehow a net benefit. So that phrase net benefit is, of course, not in the curriculum. If Ron DeSantis spent more time doing the job the people of Florida elected him to do and less time on his failing presidential campaign, perhaps Florida's curriculum on slavery would more accurately reflect the pain and heartbreak experienced by millions who suffered through the original sin. That sounds like he didn't look at the curriculum at all.
No, not at all.
And so John James's comment, and John James is from Michigan. I know John James. I won't say I know him well or whatever, but his comment was worse. Number one, slavery was not CTE. Nothing about that 400 years of evil was a net benefit. So there's a curious phrase again to my ancestors. There are only 5 Black Republicans in Congress, and you're attacking 2 of them. My brother in Christ. If you find yourself in a deep hole, put the shovel down. You are now so far from the party of Lincoln that your education board is rewriting history, and you're personally attacking conservatives like Tim Scott and Byron Donald on the topic of slavery. You've gone too far. So the net benefit thing. Go on. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So people are speculating, and I don't know if this is true. I did reach out to some people on his team. I did not hear back about the net benefit thing. Like, why is he quoting that? Why is that in quotations? Because it's not a real quote. So where is he getting that from? And people are speculating, because John James did endorse Donald Trump, and Wesley did also endorse Trump and is, part on the Trump train too. If maybe those are some kind of marching orders. So that's the theory out there. I don't know if that's true or not, but the net benefit thing is blatantly false, and it's a totally different meaning that he's attributing to it. To say, if you say something is a net benefit, then everything that happened to you, every whipping, every sexual assault, every time you had to hold your tongue, every time you were disrespected, whatever, everything that happened to you because of, I don't know, you learned how to cook or sew or something, then it was all a net benefit, that skill you gained compared to everything you've been through. That's not the argument that anyone is making. So what he said was a lie, and to do the whole brother in Christ thing, you're bearing false witness, sir. and then he also made it racial. He's like, you're attacking all people. So I don't like it.
The whole thing is just so stupid. I think at the end of the day, this might come out in Ron DeSantis' favor. For Republicans anyway, because yes, he is, speaking out against, is it Byron Donald's McDonald's? I should know this man's name.
I know people from within his administration said something first, and then Donald's responded to it. But I mean, Ron has said oh, don't listen to Kamala, or leave, listen to the media hype or whatever. We need to just push back against the lies. So I don't think he's attacking them hard. He's just responding to.
No, I think he's just responding to them, and I think that's going to look good for him. That he's not afraid to deviate from the status quo and stand up for himself and what he's done for his state and what he's pushed forward. He's not apologizing for it. He's clarifying this is what it is, and moving on, while people can just sit here and argue about it, or while, Tim Scott, answers questions without really looking into it. But I think a lot of this response is not genuine. I think these people know better. They know what the curriculum says. They know what it is and what it isn't. However, it's an opportunity for some of these politicians who have endorsed Trump to make Ron DeSantis look bad. Because if it's not going to be Trump, it's most likely going to be Ron DeSantis who's going to, earn that nomination spot. And it's an opportunity for, underdogs like Tim Scott to step up a little bit and gain some traction. But ultimately, I think what a lot of Republican voters are looking for is someone who can just stand up and not back down. And that's Ron DeSantis right now. So this is going to blow over. I think they're going to move on to something else. This might come up again in the debates, and it'll be another opportunity for Ron DeSantis to speak. But I think for, someone like Tim Scott or Byron from Florida, I'll never be able to get his last name right. And it's so simple, and I don't know why. I have no excuse. Donald's. Geez. I think it was an opportunity for them to educate and teach and really dig into some of the more hidden stories of slavery and the individual stories of slavery. Yes, slavery was big, bad evil. And terrible things happened. The worst crimes against humanity. Families were ripped apart. Women were assaulted. I mean, many of us still carry the DNA from those sexual assaults. So, yeah, big, bad evil. No one's denying that. But at the same time, there were opportunities within the middle of all that evil for these oppressed people to make something for themselves, to take what they were learning, inadvertently learning, and use it to their benefit. I mean, how do you think they were able to thrive post-Reconstruction? What do you think they just, the slaves are freed and they magically had these new skills? No, they took the skills that they learned in the middle of slavery while they were still in chains, and they built communities, they built cities, they built universities, they built businesses, they built their own Wall Street, they built their own little isolated parts of communities, and they were able to thrive within these communities for many, many decades. And it all started with,
Washington talked about, like, after slavery, there were slaves who were better off than some of these white people because they looked down on physical labor, and you had all these black people who do everything.
Yeah. I think people forget that post Civil War, the South had been decimated. A lot of people like to talk about, generational wealth and, what was passed down from, like, what money? What money? So by the time, the Confederacy becomes a thing and they had Confederate currency, and then the Civil War ends, and the Union or the United States would not let them convert that Confederate currency. So you had a lot of people who were slave owners, plantation owners, who had to start from scratch, from the ground up, because their land had been torn apart, set on fire, decimated. Their labor was gone. The money they had was worthless. But you had these freed men and women of color who've been doing physical labor, who had been working in offices, businesses, doing all these things, whether it's in music, religion, what have you, these skills that many of their white counterparts didn't want anything to do with. And they were able to take these skills and build something bigger, better, and much quicker. Why don't you want to teach that? That's so incredible. That's amazing. That is, while they were still in chains, they were able to find something good in it.
An example that I've been using that's pretty undeniable is talking about Robert Smalls. So like he was taught how to sell a ship, so skill there. Then he stole a Confederate ship. Freed himself, freed other people, and then get his knowledge that he knew of, like, the coast and stuff, he gave that to the Union and stuff, so to help them fight against the Confederacy. And then because of his story and what he's able to accomplish, that helped to convince Lincoln, hey, black people can go ahead and fight in this thing. So obvious skill, obviously used it to his benefit. That's undeniable. There's no moral statement in it. It's just what happened, and it's amazing. And it's an amazing story, and it's a story I didn't learn about until I was an adult.
Right.
It would have been really nice to learn. A lot of people's perception of Black history and what they learn in school, they learn about a handful of people: Booker T. Washington, Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, George Washington Carver. I don't know if you said already. Madam C.J. Walker. And you learn about slavery, but your perception is these people pick cotton. And then some Civil War happens, and it jumps to, like, Jim Crow,
right?
Civil rights.
Like, nothing happened in the middle.
So that's the perception of what people are learning. And someone wrote to me as I was talking about this on, like, a Facebook comment, a YouTube comment, and that's what they basically said. Like, I think this is a good lesson. All the things they're teaching. To dispel that myth and to let people know that there was other things that people were doing. And the National Review actually wrote a pretty good article, and they mentioned how it was dangerous to teach these slaves those certain skills of, like, carpentry and being a blacksmith and stuff, because it empowered them with a particular sense of agency. And then they traveled more, whether they were meeting other enslaved Black people or people who weren't enslaved, but they had more opportunity to spread information that their slave masters wouldn't want other people to know. They had more opportunities to try to plan revolts. And they mentioned
Nat Turner,
two people who staged a revolt in their piece. So I think that's pretty incredible to know. Otherwise, what you get the Kanye, like, slavery was a choice. Like, no, there's some people who tried. There's some people who tried.
Yeah, like when you talk about, it being kind of a dangerous thing to teach these slaves these skills because of potential consequences. That's one of the reasons why slaves weren't allowed to read. It wasn't always like that. That slaves weren't allowed to learn how to read or write. That actually was a result of a revolt. That's kind of the story that's always been told, the Nat Turner revolt, that he was a learned man, so to speak, the way they would have said, because they would actually use him to go to plantation to preach the gospel, so to speak, to kind of keep slaves in line. And he would read from the Bible. He ended up, doing a revolt. Now, no one really knows whether or not Nat Turner was, on the up and up, or he was crazy. I think he was crazy. But what he did with his revolt was one of the reasons why they stopped allowing slaves to learn how to read and write, because they realized, like you said, it's dangerous. If we allow them a sense of agency, if we allow them to, have any kind of education, if we allow them to, feel empowered in any way, it can cause problems for us. And that's says a lot about how they saw their slaves. As much as they tried to strip them of their humanity, they knew and they understood, if we allow these people any kind of agency, any kind of education, any kind of leg up, any kind of sliver and opportunity to see themselves as worthy, it's over for us. They knew. And to not even teach something like that, to teach, not only did these slave owners know, we can't teach them how to read and write, but it's okay to teach them how to build houses. It's okay to teach them how to work a counter at a store. It's okay to teach them how to play music. It's okay to teach them how to preach and all these different things, or how to work a field. That couldn't possibly, benefit them in any way. But I forget the man's name. He was a slave in South Carolina, had somewhat of a decent relationship with his slave owner, his master. He always referred to him, he was a good master. You had those kinds of relationships, but he worked a field and he actually learned a different kind of skill. I forget what it was, but he was able to, do his regular slave work every day, but also make a little bit of money on the side. And eventually he used that money to buy his freedom. These are things that happened and they're worth hearing about. And young Black men and women need to know, but they don't want young Black men and women to know, because if you some things just don't change. Some things just do not change. If you give young Black men and women any kind of knowledge that they are more than what they perceive themselves to be, it's over.
Yeah.
If you plant that seed in a young Black man's head that in his blood is a sense of resilience and resourcefulness that can overcome any situation, that even in the midst of darkness can find light and hope, it's over. They lose the Black vote. They don't want Black people to know who they are or where they come from. And that's what we come from. I said this on Twitter, that's our story. It's the Black American story, the slavery, from slavery to Reconstruction to Black Wall Street to Jim Crow to now. It's a beauty from ashes story. The ashes being slavery. And yet in the middle of those ashes, they were able to rise up and build something for themselves. And then once slavery was over, they were basically set.
Yeah. Your tweet was really good, by the way.
I was sitting on it for a while because I was just trying to figure out what is going on.
Oh, girl, I was checking to see if you made a TikTok about it. I'm like, where is it? Is she gonna say something?
I was thinking about it, but I'm like, I really don't understand what's going on, because I'm like, okay, because I read the curriculum. Okay, I'm like, okay, so what's the problem? I don't understand. So I'm trying to listen to, and this is the problem with Twitter, everything moves so super fast. Trying to figure out what the controversy was, and then realizing, oh, this is a misreading of the curriculum, a deliberate misreading and deliberate deception for one political reason or another. That's what this is about. Yeah, because ultimately, there's no issue here. This is historical fact. Black people learned skills while they were enslaved, and they were able to use these skills while in slavery and after slavery to their benefit, sometimes using it to make their own money, sometimes using it to build their own communities, because not every Black person lived on a plantation, and we got to get this out of our head. I'm in the city of New Orleans. You can't grow nothing here. Not in the ground. I mean, you can't even bury dead people. You can't have any kind of plantations here. You had mostly, so we're talking what, turn of the century, 1800s, 1700s. So most of your commerce would have been in the French Quarter. There's no agriculture there. So you had a lot of slave owners who lived within the French Quarter and outside of it who owned slaves, and their slaves did not live with them, but they lived in their own communities, separate, but would go in to work. This just popped in my head and I don't know why, but Star Wars, I'm thinking of the Phantom Menace with Anakin and his mom, how they were enslaved and they had their own place where they had their own place where they lived, yet they still went and worked for what's his name. That's how it was for a lot of enslaved individuals. They didn't live with, master and missus. They had their own homes in their own communities, slave communities, and then would go into work.
And some people they um uh George Washington Carver, his um he ended up being adopted by the people who were his masters. They had his mom, him and his mom ended up getting kidnapped, I think, and then they couldn't find his mom, and then they brought him back, and then they he had a brother, I think, that he'd work out in the field, but he was kind of too sickly and stuff, so that he like did other things in the house, and they like educated him and other stuff like that. So after he's free, they like helped him with his education and put through school and all kinds of other stuff. So I mean, not every experience is exactly 12 years a slave,
Right.
So which was a really good movie, by the way, if you haven't seen it. It was a really good movie.
I finally watched it last year.
Did Lupita get it? Did she won an Oscar for that, right?
She did.
She win an Oscar? She deserved it. She deserved it.
For her like 15 minutes on screen.
Oh, she earned it. She definitely earned it for that small time she was in there. So the Black Conservative Federation totally denounced DeSantis and their curriculum, and they said Black Conservative Federation strongly condemns Governor Ron DeSantis and State Board of Education's position regarding slaves learning skills. This stance undermines the historical reality of slavery and the unimaginable hardships endured by millions of enslaved individuals. In reality, slaves were oppressed and denied access to education, equal opportunities, and social mobility. They were forced to adapt to survive under extraordinary circumstances, showcasing remarkable resilience and resourcefulness. However, attributing their acquired skills as a benefit is an oversimplification and can obscure the true nature of their experiences. Slaves did not have agency. They were forced to do jobs without pay. This is not a benefit by any stretch of the imagination. Positions and implementation of curriculum like this dismiss and misinterpret the experiences of marginalized communities, hinder progress, and will alienate potential supporters. In order to grow the party, the GOP must demonstrate a commitment to inclusivity, empathy, and an accurate understanding of our shared history.
I'm sick of the word inclusive.
Yeah, so I did reach out for like a clarification, because the curriculum says that they develop skills, and their statement said that they acquired skills. So they agree. And the main issue seems to be that they are concerned it will obscure history in an accurate portrayal. But I'm like, if you looked at the curriculum, how do you get that impression? Because they talk about how difficult it was over on the way on the ship. They talk about how harsh plantation life was, malnutrition, infant mortality rates, beatings, and all sorts of other things like that. So if they're talking about how difficult it was to be a slave, why do people have this impression that they're teaching that it's a good thing? It doesn't make any sense.
Nobody wants to read anymore. I'm just convinced. Nobody wants to read. Everybody wants to be right, and they want to be right first, and they want to be right loud, even if they're wrong. Like, what are you even talking about? No one is saying that slavery was beneficial. It is not controversial or wrong to say that while enslaved, they acquired skills that they were able to use to their benefit while enslaved and after slavery. That's not a controversial thing to say. It's not a wrong thing to say. It's an uncomfortable thing to say because of what we've been taught about slavery. Not wrong about what we've been taught about slavery, but we've been told for our entire life slavery is this big bad evil, which it was. Mm-hmm. So it's really hard to reconcile that even in the midst of that evil, there was hope.
Yeah, and it's a big bad evil, and it's not something that's obviously exclusive to the United States. So I find it very interesting because people have made comparisons to this and the Holocaust, and so they've said things like, "Oh, would you say that the Jews learned skills while enslaved and then use them to their benefit?" And I saw there's a couple people who said that. I was on a live when someone said that. Gianno Caldwell from Fox ended up saying that, replying to DeSantis's press secretary about it. Let me see if I have the. I thought I had the screenshot. I guess I don't. But I thought that was a weird comparison because I'm like, it's almost like you're trying to one up them because one is like about genocide, and you could compare it to when Jews were actually enslaved. There's something comparable.
Yeah.
And then they jumped to the Holocaust. So I don't think it's a.
People love to bring up the Holocaust when talking about slavery, but they're not even comparable. It's definitely. There was definitely, you can talk about genocide with respect to American slavery. I say American slavery because I'm an American, but it's not the same as there's definitely, what am I trying to say? The Holocaust was an extermination. It wasn't just, it's something more extreme than genocide. And it happened so fast. And it was so much damage in such a short amount of time. And the entire point of the Holocaust with respect to, putting Jews in camps was to destroy them and kill them and wipe them off the face of the earth. Whereas with slavery, they didn't want them dead. They cost money. They wanted free labor. They needed them to survive that that middle passage. Mm-hmm. They needed them to be strong and, ready to work because they needed to sell them. They needed to make money. They needed them to be as alive as possible, but not too alive that they could run. Whereas with the Holocaust, they wanted them dead. Now, I imagine for those who did survive in the camps, they had to do things in order to survive, in order to keep their wits about them, in order to stay sane, and in order to, keep up hope. But you really can't compare. It happens. The Holocaust happened so fast. And it damn near ended as quick as it started. So much damage in just a couple of years. Mm-hmm. It's just, you can't compare the two. And I hate it when people try to bring it up and say, what about what about it? We're not talking about the same thing.
Yeah, and they're like, if you hesitate, they're like, well, why are you so uncomfortable? Why can't you just say it? I'm like, because it's not the same thing. But even so, technically, so this was actually a discussion on Fox News. I'm going to play, Ben Shapiro talked about it a bit, so I'm going to play a segment from his show. And they got into that discussion because Greg Gutfeld responded to one of his co-hosts on The Five. And so it resulted in the White House calling him anti-Semitic stuff.
See, I miss having cable. I miss watching The Five, which is, I guess, the 4 for me now because I'm central.
False accusations with regard to Ron DeSantis, all the lies that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden are talking about how American history won't be taught, Black history won't be taught in Florida schools anymore, which is a lie. It is not true. It is a lie. Okay, so Gutfeld was talking about the part of the curriculum that says that some slaves cultivated skills they could use for their personal benefit after slavery, which is clearly true. And he makes the pretty much unobjectionable point that even in the worst circumstances human beings could possibly be in, they cultivate skills because this is how human beings adapt and survive, and it demonstrates their resiliency. Even in the worst places human beings can be, they cultivate skills that they can then use for their personal benefit afterward. And he makes the comparison to Viktor Frankel writing Man's Search for Meaning after the Holocaust. The notion that he was able to cultivate certain spiritual levels through suffering in the Holocaust. And naturally, then the left jumps on that. It's amazing. Here's Greg Gutfeld.
Do you think that she read the whole thing and just decided to cherry pick something?
I do think that she read the whole thing. And I think that it's an incredibly complex piece. When you look at the 191 passages, you have some good. And frankly, I'm just fundamentally uncomfortable with the sentence that Blacks benefited at all from this. And, it made me think, as someone, obviously I'm not Black, but I'm Jewish. Would someone say about the Holocaust, for instance, that there were some benefits for Jews, right? While they were hanging out in concentration camps, you learned a strong work ethic, right? Maybe you learned a new skill.
Did you ever read Man's Search for Meaning? Vic Frankel talks about how you had to survive in a concentration camp by having skills. You had to be useful. Utility kept you alive.
We're also talking about middle schoolers here.
Okay, again,
what AP course?
Absolutely unobjectionable. As an Orthodox Jew, and thank God, my immediate family, our family line was in America since the early 20th century. But The entire extended family was in Europe at the time of the Holocaust, so we lost a lot of, distant relations and family relations in Europe during the Holocaust. And of course, I'm deeply ensconced in the Jewish community, so pretty much everybody knows a Holocaust survivor. What he is saying there, which is that the durability and the adaptability of human beings, the resiliency of human beings in terrible circumstances leads them to cultivate skills that are useful to them in the rest of their lives, even in the worst circumstances. One of the glories of being a human being. That's unobjectionable. So what does the White House do? They immediately call him an anti-Semite.
Yeah, so I was really curious, and I was like, oh, I'd like for Ben to like talk about the responses that people are giving to the Holocaust. I'd like to see what he said. So I was glad to see that response to that discussion. And yeah, people are going in at Greg and calling him an anti-Semite and stuff. But I mean, that's a pretty renowned book that he's referring to by Vic Frankel. So people find meaning. I mean, that's what his book is for. Like that men search for, meaning in life, or need a reason to live. And even through that suffering, he was able to deepen his spirituality and other things like that. So people throwing shade at him, he's quoting an author. He's quoting a book. He's quoting the words of someone who survived the Holocaust. And does it make him an anti-Semite, especially with the White House, how the people in their party, who they just let them get away saying all kinds of different stuff. So it's just pretty incredible.
I mean, it's human nature. Adapt or die. Adapt or die. You adapt or die. Either you figure out how to survive within the environment you're in, or you die. So the question that has to be asked by this AP course, I believe it's an African American history AP course, is how did the slaves adapt to their environment, and how are they able to use these adaptations to their benefit to survive? It's common sense. I mean, you don't need to know anything about American history or the history of slavery in the United States to know that in the most evil and horrible and dire of circumstances, human beings will adapt to survive. They will figure it out. They will make a way where there isn't one because they have no choice.
Yeah.
And the question is, well, how did they do? That's human nature. And throughout history and wherever, this is always true. We've seen it time and time again, that in the most awful and evil and horrible of circumstances, human beings find a way to adapt and survive. So the question that you have to ask is, okay, how did slaves do that? While they were shackled, while they were in chains, while they were not able to read or write, while they had absolutely no free will or agency, how were they able to adapt and survive? And how were they able to use these adaptations for their benefit, to make their life, to give them hope? This isn't a controversial thing to say.
Yeah. So Viktor Frankl, he was a psychiatrist and a neurologist who suffered, well, obviously as a in the Holocaust, but his big, philosophical contribution was that man doesn't want a reason to be happy. I mean, a man does not want to be happy. He wants a reason to be happy. So he was pretty profound. I'm just blown away by the comparison. Again, she had a direct comparison that she could have used. She could have used the comparison of Jews actually being enslaved, but again, it's just kind of like they want to one up it to prove that people are uncomfortable with the phrasing. And people can be uncomfortable with it, that's fine, but that doesn't make it not true. And you still don't, and it still doesn't entitle you with the, that make it right for you to go ahead and Frankenstein what the curriculum actually is and attribute all this malice to what they're saying, when the truth is, again, they learn skills, and in some cases, it doesn't say all of them, it said in some instances could be used to their personal benefit, and we just know that it's objectively true. And not all experiences people had with slavery is comparable to what Viktor Frankl went through. I mean, it's so I don't like the comparison at all. But people are just trying to one up folks, as I said. So back to Ron DeSantis, he was asked after like Tim Scott's comments what he thought, and I thought he made a good point, and there was a video that pretty much shows this point. I showed this today on my show, but let's go ahead and watch it.
What do you think about what Tim Scott said?
You know, I think part of the reason our country has struggled is because DC Republicans all too often accept false narratives, accept lies that are perpetrated by the left, and to, you know, accept the lie that Kamala Harris has been perpetrating even when that has been debunked. That's not the way you do it. The way you do it, the way you lead, is to fight back against the lies, is to speak the truth. So I'm here defending my state of Florida against false accusations and against lies, and we're going to continue to speak the truth.
So he has the right approach to fight. You have to fight back against the lies, and it's important to fight back against the lies because this will come up repeatedly. They're trying to lay the groundwork of him just being a racist. So if he is in that general election, by some miracle, he beats Trump in the primary or something, people are like, oh, well, he's not getting any votes with any of these minorities because he's racist. And we know these are racist because that's what's in people's minds. And this is reminiscent of what they try to do with the Don't Say Gay bill as well.
Yeah.
But just an example of why they need to fight back. Vivek was doing an interview. He has nothing to do with any of this. He has nothing to do with any of this. And they asked his opinion about it. And he said, well, I want to focus on other stuff. And I guess must have said something like, and this is like an attack from the media or Kamala or something like that. And they bring up that the Black Republicans are the ones who are talking about it.
Problem with. But I do think that some of these issues and these spats can be distractions from what should Governor DeSantis or Tim Scott or myself or others actually be debating. How do we grow an economy? How do we actually lift all people up, revive self-confidence and pride in the next generation of Americans? That's what I think we need to be focused on.
All right, I'm going to move on here. I do think it is worth underscoring that these criticisms have not come, that we're quoting here, have not come from the media. They have come from African Americans in the Republican Party, Senator Tim Scott, Congressman John James.
She's trying so hard to make a point, and just she was trying to bait him. He wasn't interested. He's like, I don't want to talk about this. He's probably thinking, man, this has nothing to do with me. Can we please move on?
Well, I'm sure he thinks it has nothing to do with him, and he doesn't really want to be,
I wouldn't either. I'm
in
like,
all the beef and stuff.
That'd be like, this has nothing to do with me. Can I please? I am not. I am the wrong kind of brown. Can I please move on?
But the point here is that they have this. They have the permission to go this different route with the narrative now, because Tim Scott and he said what he's. I'm not surprised how that kind of unfolded. But Byron Donald's tweeted what he tweeted and has been asked about it. But John James's tweet and Wesley Hunt's tweet, it's totally false, made up lines, attributes really terrible motive to the curriculum, plays like the race card. Like, you're attacking Black people. It's really terrible. So now they get to point to them. But today I noted, like, Black people don't care. Black Democrats don't care. They're not saying, oh, congrats, thank you for standing up to the system. They're saying, well, you guys are in the party of racists, so this is your fault. This is hilarious. You guys are still coons. You're all married to white women, except for Tim Scott, which some people think. I saw a comment that mentioned all of them are married to white women except Tim Scott, and then they said he's suspect. So no one is respecting them for coming out and saying this stuff. No one.
It doesn't. No. I think Democrats know that Black Americans in general just don't care. They're not interested. We got bills. Okay, gas is high. It's hot outside, which they can't do nothing about, but it's hot. Okay, and I'm aggravated. There are potholes. There's a big old pothole in the middle of my street. It's the same hole that just keeps unearthing itself. There are real problems that we're dealing with. I don't give a, pardon my language, but I don't give a brown rat's ass what Florida is doing with their education. I don't care. Do not care. Do what you want. That has nothing to do with me. I'm over here in New Orleans, Louisiana. Our kids can't read. We have a police shortage. People are getting shot on the highway. They're just shooting people for fun. I've got real problems to worry about. This is not one of them. Sitting here saying, well, you look at how racist the Republicans. You've been saying that for the last however many years. You think, am I supposed to care now? All of a sudden?
I had a conversation yesterday and they said, even if what they were saying was true, even if they were teaching something that was just kind of wrong with this other point, and considering all the other stuff is good, they just don't like this particular line. It's still not worse than the things that the Democrats are proposing in as far as like the gender stuff.
We could be here all day talking.
We could be here all day, but so he was just like, so what does it matter? Like, if you looked at the options, there's still the better option. If you were thinking critically, I mean, a lot of people they just go and they hit the straight party ticket ballot or whatever, you know. So they're not really thinking about it. DeSantis being a racist, if he's the nominee or whatever, they're just gonna be like, oh, I have affirmation to do what I was gonna do anyway. That's you know.
Oh gosh, I just want to just hold Tim Scott and Byron Donald by their shoulders and be like, the black people on the other side, they don't like you. They're not gonna like you today. They're not gonna like you tomorrow. They're not gonna like you after what you say. It doesn't really matter. You're not going to gain any favors or anything by, trying to push Ron DeSantis to the side. The best thing you can do is to continue to be true to yourself, because that's how you've been getting elected, sir. But like, who are you trying to please? Who are you trying to perform for? You know what the curriculum says. I know what the curriculum says. You know your history. God forbid we teach young black men and women how to find hope in the darkest parts of history. Heaven forbid. I hate politics. I hate it because they're all lying. They're all not being truthful. But then you have Ron DeSantis over here who's like, I'm defending my state of Florida, because homie knows actions speak louder than words.
Yeah.
They keep running their mouths and talking about stuff nobody cares about. And if they don't stop, Tim Scott's going to be done in terms of his presidential race. I think once this all blows over, it's going to work in Ron DeSantis' favor, because Ron DeSantis knows, because he's been dealing with Florida and COVID and gender issues, that actions speak louder than words. You can't just talk a big game. You've got to play it.
Yeah.
And he's playing it. Oh, you want to talk crap about Florida? Let me defend my state of Florida. That speaks volumes to Republican voters, whether they want to admit it or not, whether they like Trump, whether they like DeSantis or whatever. But seeing a politician come to a state's defense, America's defense, after, having Biden and then Obama, however many years before, really just kind of throw America under the bus.
And that's a really good point, because I mean, something that is attractive to voters is like Trump's like, I'm going to just punch you in the face, I'm not going to back down. The fact that when all hell broke loose around Brett Kavanaugh, that Trump was like, no, we're going to not just throw him to the wayside because of all these accusations and stuff, and he got confirmed and stuff. And but some people would have just been like, no, this is making too much noise. But it's like, but if they do it to him and they're successful, I think they probably could have picked someone better than Kavanaugh. But if they could just bork him, they would just do it with the next person. So they had to take a stand and say, no, we're not doing that. But other people probably would have buckled. Ron DeSantis doesn't come off like a buckler. Tim Scott could come off like a buckler. At least that's what I've seen, the different commentary that people have. Now he can come at the media, and he has some good interviews and other stuff like that. I do commend him for mentioning in an interview that Kamala Harris approved of the AP curriculum that had like the same language. So he is acknowledging that she's insincere. So at least there is that. So I don't know how often they'll keep asking him these questions about this. But DeSantis, just if they ask, he just needs to keep pushing. And that's what they did with the parental rights and education bill, the Don't Say Gay bill. There's people who still think, you literally can't say gay in Florida or whatever. But
doesn't think that.
But people in Florida, did he not get reelected by 19 points? People, they asked people like, what was in the curriculum, like literally like word for word. It turns out Republicans, independents, and Democrats agreed with the bill. So you just have to keep fighting with the truth. And that's what he will do. And that's what everyone else should have done. And I really, really don't like what John James and them did, because I know just like the left will use Black people to discredit other Black people with topics and stuff, and they're trying to do that too. They're trying to say like, how dare you attack these Black people on this issue regarding slavery? Just because you're Black doesn't mean you're right.
Right.
Just because you're Black doesn't mean you're right. And there's all these Congress people who are in the tank for Trump right now. They can say what they want, but it's not going well as far as like other commentators don't like it.
This is the most bizarre presidential election of my voting lifetime, I swear.
Rob Smith said, I cannot believe so many of our Black Republican politicians are falling for this. This is pre-K level bleep Dems are testing right now. If we have Tim Scott and Byron Donald and others taking this obvious bait this early, we are absolutely doomed in 2024. So, it's just
Rob Smith.
It's just so obvious what's going on here. Just so obvious.
Rob Smith is a gay Black Republican, for those who don't know.
Yeah. So
no, but he's right, because they're baiting them, and they're just this is the problem with a lot of your Washington Republicans who are so steeped in that environment. It's so different from politics within the state. It's so different. The mindset is different. And Tim Scott, I think, has been in Washington. He spends a little too much time in Washington, I think. And I think that's why he was so quick to jump, because that was a very Washington thing for him to do. And I think as much as Republicans love Tim Scott, they do. I mean, this is the presidential election. So, everyone's fighting everybody, but once it's all over, we're all going to be friends again. He's very much Washington, and that's just how he operates. That's how he moves. You're dealing with a governor who's been battling Washington for the last, 3 years now, between COVID, between gender issues, just literally just making things happen, because he's like, I'm not waiting for y'all. I'm gonna get things done. Oh, y'all aren't using these resources, then we're gonna use up all these resources.
Yeah. And fighting is where he looks good. Fighting like for Florida with COVID, he looks good. Fighting for parental rights, he looks good, because he looks tough to his constituents, and he can govern pretty well. Even people who are Democrats or independents or whatever don't like maybe all the social stuff. They're like, trains running on time. It's actually pretty nice here. Won by 19 points. So I think ultimately it'll be good for DeSantis if he doesn't back down on the truth, and people just have to keep pushing the truth. But these Black Republicans have stained themselves in the eyes of a lot of people. I've seen a lot of conservatives like Ali Stuckey and other folks who are just like, what is going on here? This is just blatantly untrue. We're disappointed in you, and I can kind of understand Tim Scott's, but John James's comment is
out of pocket.
Really not out of pocket, and he barely won his seat. Michigan is pretty much Trump country, though. Trump country. Even people who aren't fond of him won't say so, because it's just dangerous to do so. I've been to rallies and people are like, I'm here to be seen.
The whole thing is bizarre. This whole election cycle is just the weirdest. Like, why are we here? I don't know. I just look at, okay, again, I live in the city of New Orleans, okay, where they eat corruption for breakfast. As much crap as I talk about the politicians here, for me to, whether you agree with the indictments or not, irrelevant. The fact is they exist, they're there. I can't, in good conscience, vote for someone who is facing, whether it's federal, state indictments, given what I've seen here in the city of New Orleans. We had a DA who was elected while he was facing charges. Our mayor was dealing with charges when she was elected. And I'm tired of just seeing politicians being put in positions of power while not being held accountable for their actions. I just want to see how all of this plays out before I make any kind of decisions. But ultimately, I'm more than likely, I don't see a reason why I wouldn't at this point, wouldn't support whoever the Republican nominee is, because 4 more years of Biden, bless his little senile heart, we can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just, I am not making any concrete decisions. I want everyone to stop shouting and get on a debate stage.
Oh, Trump had tweeted, but retweeted something that was like, let them fight. I want to see who's best for VP or something like that. So he's just like, so
that's funny. I'm gonna give him that one.
It is funny. You actually, Ilhan Omar had screenshotted, or I don't know if she screenshotted, but she shared it and she said, everyone is a supporting member in his show, in his movie, even if they don't know it. And I'm like, this is really telling it. It's pretty spot on for like just the whole political framework.
Because they're all fighting with each other, talking crap about each other. Like, shut up. Okay, I know who all of you jokers are. I need you to tell me why I shouldn't vote for Biden. I mean, I'm not going to, but give me a reason. Give me a good reason besides I don't want to.
Mm-hmm. Well,
tell me why you're the best person for this job. No one's telling me that. You're just telling me why this person over here sucks.
Well, I think some people are making that argument. I don't know how the debate's going to be. I'm sure this topic will, like you said, will probably come up. And I from Trump's statement or whatever that he did, I assume he's still not going to show up for debate. And a lot of people think that's fine because he's so far ahead. And
so cocky though.
Yeah, well, he ended up tapping out of the debates in 2016 after he kind of had enough. And I guess it worked out fine for him, obviously. But I think he just didn't like. Maybe he thought it was a waste of time, but he also thought they were treating him unfairly. I thought they treated him appropriately, and they were mean to other people. Like they said some out of pocket stuff to Rand Paul that I thought was so rude. They basically it was something like, "How do you feel about Ted Cruz taking over your father's legacy?" I was like, oh my gosh, that was way meaner than asking about calling Rosie O'Donnell fat. Like,
right.
I'm like, oh my gosh, you bringing his daddy into this? Jeez. So Fox News had some rude commentators during the debates, but I find it interesting and a little alarming how many Trump people don't think that he should debate. I know he doesn't have to debate, but how would you feel about people just deciding that they don't have to debate? But because we saw that in Arizona with Katie Hobbs and Carrie Lake. Katie Hobbs just wouldn't show up. Like they just wouldn't do a debate. So they never got there, back and forth. Maybe if they had a debate, Carrie Lake, maybe she would have won.
They need to debate because the sense of entitlement has got to go amongst politicians who think they can just, be present, look cute on camera and say a couple little sound bites here and they've won our vote. They need to get back to this mindset where they have to earn it. That just as quickly as we can vote them in, we can take them out. They need to get to a place where they feel like they earn it, where they have to be honest and truthful, and where they're going to be held accountable to their word. But the problem with not going to a debate, that means that's less they're saying. And if you're not saying a whole lot, then we're not going to hold you accountable for a whole lot. But a lot of it is just this sense of entitlement amongst politicians who think they have a right.
I mean, if Fetterman could show up to his debate with Oz.
I can't believe Pennsylvania did that.
Well, they did it. They did it.
What a mess.
They shouldn't have. That's another thing to be mad about Trump for, the whole Oz thing.
Yeah.
He didn't even live the state, man. But there is some statements going out from like Trump folks that are saying stuff like everybody else should drop out. I'm trying to find it. I think it was Charlie Kirk and somebody else said something along the lines of Trump has been calling for people to just drop out now. He's like, just drop out. We'll fund the biggest outreach for like voter day turnout stuff. And it's like, well, are you sure this is not going to your legal bill, sir?
I think people are going to be more inclined to vote for Trump if they're given options. And then, that primary goes along fair and square and according to, normal, regular plan. Goodness, my forehead is so big.
Oh, it was Wesley Hunt who's the other one. So this same Black Republican. This New York Times poll only affirms what we've known for months. This primary is over. Our focus needs to be on removing Biden from the White House, which means it's time to rally around President Trump. Any GOP candidate telling you they're playing the long game, or any candidate who's willing to accept the weaponization of the government against Trump for their own personal gain, should not have a seat at the table in the next administration. And Charlie Kirk said the newly released New York Times Siena poll should confirm what many of us have suspected for months. The GOP primary is over. I like Governor DeSantis and have tremendous respect for him as a man and a governor. I consider him a friend, and I believe he's America's greatest governor. As such, I have refused to get in the mud and attack him. He's a great American, and I want him to remain dominant political player for years/decades to come. But his campaign has failed to gain traction. So
it just started. It's not even fall yet. Okay. Like we're months away from Ohio and Iowa. We're months away. So there's anything can happen. Anything can happen. Let's not forget, Trump is dealing with a lot legally right now. Anything can happen. So it's really best that these other players who are running for president, Tim Scott, bless his heart, him included, I'm not mad at him no more, need to keep speaking up and making their case. Because should something happen with Trump, because again, legally, he's dealing with a lot, anything can happen. Should he be forced to drop out of this race for one reason or another, the American people have the right to know who their options are and act accordingly. So no, this primary isn't over. The man is facing indictments. Again, legally, anything can happen, whether you agree with the indictments or not, whether you think it's all political theater, whether you think it's just all, them trying to take him down. There's no merit to it. Doesn't matter. The fact is they exist.
Yeah,
it's attached to his name, and he still has to go through a legal proceeding. These things still has to happen. He's still facing some kind of charges. The man is, I don't know why we have to say this. The man is dealing with legal charges, criminal charges. Asking everyone else to drop out of the race would be so premature, immature, and just stupid. Because again,
it's also not fair to the voters too, because it's fair to give people options, especially in a primary. And it's different when you're an incumbent. It's, and you've done a great job, and if you have a credible threat to you and you're the incumbent, it's not looking good for your reelection, usually how that works. No. But he's not an incumbent. He's running alongside everyone else. He's pretty much kind of, because he was president before, but it's an open field, and people love what he did and think he was a great president, and they want to give him another chance. But there's also people who are like, I'm tired of the Trump show. At least give me another option. And if he wins the nomination, people are like, well, I'll support him. And then there's people who are like, I still won't support, but but they just want some kind of other option. And people deserve a chance to run, and people have a chance to hear them out, and people deserve a chance to choose, and let the chips fall where they may. I don't. It's not his turn. That's so like Hillary Clinton to me. I don't like that. That's like the logic of so many people. No, he has to. I felt very strongly he earned his reelection, but 2020 happened, and he has to run like everyone else does, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. On a closing note, I guess probably about this particular topic, Ron DeSantis did invite Kamala Harris to come down to Florida for a discussion about this particular topic. He sent out like an official letter and everything. He's like, since you're so good at just coming down here on a whim, we'll give you some time. And savage. And then he said that they didn't invite Dr. Allen, who is responsible for much of this curriculum. There was a hit piece, I think, that NBC and some other people put out saying that some other people in the panel didn't quite agree with it. And I read through it and was like, they did have questions about that line, but Dr. Allen was persuasive. I'm like, okay, it sounds like they had issues, and he convinced them that he was correct, and that's what they went along with. I'm gonna play this segment from him, this interview on Fox News. He's had a lot of interviews about this particular topic, but right. But here he is.
One of the authors of the Florida curriculum, Dr. William Allen, joins me now. So, Dr. Allen, why do you think Kamala Harris is being dishonest about what's being taught about slavery?
Permit me not to give you Kamala Harris's motives. They are invisible. I don't know them. We can all have suspicions that there's a dishonest purpose afoot. But what's more important than that dishonest purpose is the truth. And this curriculum is devoted to telling the truth, whereas Kamala Harris has retailed a lie. Now, it may only have been a falsehood the first time she stated it, but when you repeat a falsehood, it becomes a lie.
Tell her right now what specifically this component of the slavery course teaches.
Well, permit me to have Frederick Douglass tell her. He wrote an autobiography in which he described how the mistress of his slave owner began to teach him to read. She pulled back the curtain through which a glimmer of light shone before the master forced her to close it. But that glimmer of light was enough for Frederick Douglass to illumine a bright flame that he exploited to his benefit and his country's benefit thereafter. Such examples are numerous, and they are retailed in the stories of people who suffered the indignity of slavery time and again. And quickly, permit me to say, what this curriculum is about is having people who live the experience, who live the history, tell their stories. And nothing is more important than that we never, ever erase the stories that the people who live the stories tell.
So, there you have it. I mean, I another thing I didn't really like about the Black Conservative Federation statement about the slaves didn't have agency, they didn't have this, didn't have that, and I'm like, it makes, like, I know they were treated in a lot of circumstances inhuman, but the statement that they gave dehumanizes the slaves. At least that's how I felt reading it, and I don't understand. I don't understand the purpose of it, to particularly tell one side of the story when it's far more complex.
Yeah. It's the complexities of it that just, to me, just makes it so beautiful. Yeah, it's awful. Again, slavery was a big, bad evil, but even in the darkest of times, you can find hope and you can build a future. And listening to him talk about, you can hear the passion. You can hear it, how passionate he is about this subject and how excited he is to have it taught. Because these are the pieces of slavery that in a regular history class you don't learn about. You just learn the basics, that slavery happened, it was wrong, and it ended. It's these stories, these individual stories in between that don't get told unless you have a African American history class. But it's 2023, and the last thing they want to do is fill these Black kids' heads with hope. You know, they say if you don't learn history, you're doomed to repeat it. But I think you can also say if you don't learn history, you can't repeat it. And what can be repeated here are these lessons of resilience and adapting to dire circumstances, these lessons of faith and hope. It's important for young Black men and women, especially in a time where everyone's trying to tell them they're victims, they're oppressed, everyone hates them, everyone treats them differently. You know, people are looking at you sideways, everything's a microaggression. To see that there were real hardships and real evil things done to a group of people, and yet those people still found a way to make something out of nothing. These are the stories that need to be taught. But come on, I don't like her at all. So
she was my least favorite out of all their candidates that ran in 2020. She was my absolute least favorite. I've really disliked her since I mean, I guess I wasn't paying her too much attention to her, but during the Kavanaugh hearing, and they had some kind of press conference, and she just announced, like, well, I believe Christine Blasey Ford. I'm like, you're a prosecutor. You didn't hear her testimony.
How can you just, hoe?
I'm like, how can you just make that determination? I'm like, awful. You didn't hear any of the evidence. I'm like, how dare you? So I'm like, this woman's just a liar. I know politicians lie, but she's just the worst. And then her line of questioning that she had, Like, did you believe Anita Hill? I'm just like, nobody believed Anita Hill.
The Hill.
My parents were Democrats back then, and they didn't believe Anita Hill. There was polling. People didn't believe Anita Hill. Her story was incredible.
She's just an awful person. I just don't like her. But I mean, if you want to talk affirmative action, Kamala Harris, the only reason she was picked because she was a black woman. She adds absolutely no value to the office or to Biden other than to make him look less racist than he actually is.
That's literally the truth. I mean, he said he would pick a woman. He didn't say he'd pick a black woman, but Charlamagne and a bunch of other people got together and wrote a letter after he had like one too many racist things that he said and did on the campaign trail. And then his history with the crime bill and all a bunch of other stuff. And they said, you need to pick a black woman. Now, of course, this is stupid because if he had all these issues and you're concerned about him, why is this particular thing going to be the thing that makes you happy enough to vote for him? So issue with them even writing the letter in the first place, but he definitely picked a black woman. And he picked the one who accused him of keeping her from integrating in schools. That is wild. That is wild. That is wild.
This is the world we live in. I want to get off. Can we go to Mars now? Make it happen, Elon Musk.
He's too busy fighting San Francisco over a glowing X on his roof.
Golly. I mean, you can decorate San Francisco with all the needles you find on the ground, but they're worried about an X on top of a building. Come on now. The state of California and San Francisco used to be one of those like dream vacation places that people just wanted to see because it's so beautiful. The architecture, the bridge, the houses, just the overall structure of San Francisco is so unique. But it's become such a cesspool of a place. Nobody wants to go there. People who live there don't even want to live there anymore.
Yeah.
The American dream. I mean, California used to be the dream. That used to be the dream.
Yeah. Well, it's just it is a nightmare. It is a hellscape. It's a place where you don't want your state to be like. Unfortunately, I live in Michigan, so where the transformation is happening, because our governor and our elected officials are super, super radical. But anyway, any closing thoughts about this particular topic?
I don't like Kamala Harris. I mean, I have more thoughts, but that is
not a closing thought. That is like a symphony of just fact.
I just want people to do their own research. If they can take anything from this, do your own research. So what did it said? Cackle, cackle, cackle. You're wrong for that. Just do your own research. Stop believing anything these politicians tell you. They lie to you because they want you to stay stupid. They want you to be emotional. They want you to be ignorant, especially if you are a black voter listening to this. Do your own research because you're only useful to them when you are ignorant and emotional. Once you educate yourself and you gain some actual agency, you're no longer useful to them. You're a threat, much like the slave owners way back when said, we can't teach them how to read. We can't teach them how to think for themselves. We can't teach them that they're so much more than what they actually are. Because once they figure it out, we've lost them. Same script, different cast. Nothing much has changed.
It is something that's repeated through time. I mean, Royal Meeker, who worked under the Woodrow Wilson administration, he was a eugenicist, and he knew that if you enacted the minimum wage, that it would lead to black people being unemployed. But he thought that was a good thing because he thought if they were on welfare, then they would be under the power of the government teat. And it was dangerous for people to be able to have their own independence, going out there working for competitive wages, being able to take care of their families,
right?
And having that sense of agency where they can feel like they had a destiny. They thought it would be better if the government held these people close to the chest. So though we are not enslaved in, obvious fashion from back in the day, there are ways that the government still keeps us bound intellectually, financially, and so on. So people just need to wake up. So many people crying about racism are the ones who are empowering the system of racism. If you go look in the Democrat platform right now, there's literally racism in it. They don't believe in treating in people being equal under the law. They believe race neutral policies are bad. That's literally in their platform. So they don't want people to be treated equally. That's why they talk about equity. And so we don't. If you really want a better world, just wake up, man. Wake up and start paying attention.
Do your own research. Educate yourselves. Just in this instance, I'll only say this once: just stay woke.
Be awake, not woke.
Be awake.
Be awake, not woke.
Don't let them catch you sleeping. Some of y'all are just sleeping, nodding your head in your sleep, not realizing that it's all a nightmare.
And to these Black Republicans out there, who are the congressional ones that, for whatever reasons, they decided to do whatever, like it would not have killed you to call Ron DeSantis and get that clarification. But
they
like
already hate you.
Byron Donald particularly, he didn't need to tweet that because it's like, I'm sure they'll correct this, and they're like, no, bro, it's accurate. And they didn't need to have that back and forth. He could have made a phone call. He could have made some calls. He didn't need to tweet that.
Like, we know this is Black conservatives. They already hate us. There's no changing their minds on that. They're not going to suddenly, you know what? Oh my gosh, that Black Republican, she's not really an Uncle Tom. She's actually just telling the truth, and we've been wrong this whole time. No, they're going to hate us regardless. So the best thing, so you have no reason to not tell the truth. You have nothing to lose. Tell the truth. Be honest. Stand against the grain. That's why you got elected in the first place, because you're different.
Yeah, there's nothing to gain from the route that they went. Kamala, the media, they have something to gain, and they have gained something. They're offended that they've taken her side, but they have taken their side, and they've fallen into the trap. They took the bait. It is what it is. But DeSantis will keep fighting, and people will keep fighting for DeSantis. And I just kind of hate to see it, but just because you're Black doesn't mean you're right, whether you're on the right or the left. So
we hear this on TikTok all the time. Listen to Black voices. No, don't do that. Don't do that.
Okay, where can people find you?
Everywhere. Goodness, at this point. My handle for TikTok and Instagram is right there. This is Savvy. If you want to find me on Twitter, just add a number 1 at the end of This Is Savvy. This is Savvy 1. But if you go to my TikTok or my Instagram, there will be a link where you can find me all over the interwebs. My fun little hobby is doing film reviews. So I have a podcast for all of those things. Golly, I can't even think. I hate promoting myself. I always feel so weird.
Girl, you gotta do it.
I gotta do it.
You gotta do it. I feel you though.
Yeah. Substack, YouTube, TikTok, Twitter. I'm becoming more active on Twitter, trying to get back to where I once was. Once upon a time,
you're spicy.
I can be, because you can only say so much on TikTok, so I can go on Twitter and say what I really mean without having to self-censor.
No, your stuff is spicy, pretty spicy. You should post some more videos on Twitter and see how they do. I mean, obviously can't maybe put a spicy one on TikTok, but maybe it'll go. I mean, because my YouTube, I'm surprised that they kind of just let them go crazy like that. But one of my videos that got kicked off on TikTok, I was like, well, I made it. Let me just put it on YouTube, and then it got like 2 million views.
It'd be like that.
So yeah, just I would recommend you adding some more videos and stuff to Twitter, because I know you're on Rumble. You started going on Rumble, but their platform still needs work.
I need to keep up with Rumble. I get so distracted doing other things. It's been a very busy summer. It's highly unusual. Mostly church has been keeping me busy.
Okay, well, you guys can catch me. Well, I'll be streaming tomorrow again at 4 p.m. so you guys can catch me then. Talking about the topics of the day. Please go to blackteenews.com, check out different content on my website, articles, videos, etc. Check out different merchandise that's available at the store, like the "I'm Not the Victim You're Looking For" shirt. Really like that. The "Be Better Not Bitter." We got that. I do have a bunch of books that I've written, including I do have a historical fiction fantasy series that you guys can check out. Imagine like the American Civil War meets like X-Men. So I got lots of stuff you guys can check out if you go to blackteenews.com.
Kindle Unlimited. We love to see it.
And if you like what I do here, please consider leaving a donation at blackteenews.com/donate, cost of stream, run my website, all that stuff. So if you can support, God bless you guys. Thank you so much for this late night live. And I will see you guys tomorrow. Make sure you guys are following Savvy everywhere. This is an amazing woman. So brilliant.
I do what I can.
She does what she can. And she does it well. God bless you.